host, Bill Johnson, and today we have a very special news coverage. Approximately 1 year ago today, we were astonished when Prime Minister Diefenbaker announced that our beloved AVRO Arrow would no longer exist in the Canadian Armed Forces. About 4 years ago, the Canadian government unveiled a brand new jet fighter that was one of the most technologically advanced fighter interceptors of its time that would never go into service. Recently uncovered documents, the documents that survived, have been leaked to the public, and with this information, we asked the head of the AVRO project himself, Mr. James C. Floyd, to come talk to us about the modern marvel. Over to you, James.
Hello everybody, today I'm here with the designer of the AVRO Arrow, Mr. James C. Floyd. How are you doing today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. So, let's get into it. Can you tell us a brief history about AVRO and a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is James Charles Floyd, and I was born October the 20th, 1914 in Manchester, England, and I started working for AVRO as an apprentice. As the company grew, I got promoted to the vice president and one of the lead engineers of the Arrow. So AVRO Canada was originally formed as the National Steel Car Limited of Montreal, but was then renamed the Victory Aircraft Limited in 1942, building all sorts of military equipment like artillery and trucks. They also built a number of aircraft during the war away from the German air raids. For example, they built the Hawker Hurricane and the AVRO Lancaster bomber. The company was eventually purchased in 1945 by a man called Hawker Siddeley and was renamed AVRO Canada Limited because of its first owner and aircraft designer, Elliott Verdun Rowe. The company then went on to create Canada's first jet fighter, which was called the CF-100, and went into service in 1952. But by the time the CF-100 entered service, AVRO was already working on a new project called the CF-105.
Talking about the CF-105, can you tell us what it was and what it was designed for?
When the Canadian government started designing a new supersonic jet fighter, they already had a new aircraft in production. It was called the CF-100 Canuck, and it was Canada's first jet fighter. As new technological advancements were made by the Soviet Union in the early to mid 1950s, Canada needed a jet fighter that would be able to compete with their new long-range jet bombers. In 1952, with the help of over 14,000 men and women, we started to make designs on one of the first Delta Wing aircraft in the world. Canada needed a new state-of-the-art fighter that could seek and destroy enemy bombers while being able to fly at around 50,000 feet. As drawings became models, we then went to examine the scale models in Lake Ontario by testing its aerodynamic qualities. On October the 4th, 1957, AVRO unveiled to the public, and weeks later, the AVRO Arrow was starting its high-speed taxi trials and had great success. The first ever flight was completed in late August 1958 by a test pilot named Jan Zarowski. I remember Jan over the radio telling us how the aircraft was flying quite nicely.
Well, it sounded like the Arrow is quite an aircraft. So, tell me, James, why was it discontinued?
As I recall, in the summer of 1958, a general by the name of General Perks and our finance minister, Robert Fleming, went to NORAD headquarters in the U.S. to discuss types of defense North America would have in order to defend themselves from the Soviet Union. After the meeting, General Perks was now convinced that the conventional bomber would become obsolete, and if the Soviet Union was going to attack, they would send nuclear ballistic missiles, meaning that the Canadian government would have no need for such an expensive aircraft. One of the first big blows to the AVRO Arrow is when Prime Minister Diefenbaker announced that the government would not complete the AVRO program due to the rapid development in missiles and would only complete 37 units. On October the 20th, 1959, Prime Minister Diefenbaker announced that the AVRO Arrow project would stop immediately. I, myself, and 14,600 other people lost their jobs. Overall, in my opinion, I believe that the real reason the AVRO Arrow was discontinued was that it was just too much to produce.
Well, James, thank you so much for having me interview you today. I think I've learned a lot, and I think the viewers have learned a lot as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and from me and behind the camera, have a good day, Toronto.